Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why you sometimes feel like a room is bigger or smaller than it actually is? Well, this new study explores how our brains perceive the size of spaces around us. Researchers have created a neat tool that lets them change the dimensions of a virtual tunnel to see how it affects how we feel about the size of that space. Think of it like a virtual playground for your perception. Our sense of space doesn't come from just one thing. It's a mix of visual cues like perspective, how things move as we walk, and even signals from our eyes. But when scientists want to study this, it is hard to control all these things perfectly. Imagine trying to measure how much a slight change in your couch's color affects your mood. It is tough, because so many other things can influence how you feel. Virtual reality offers a way to get a grip on this, and these researchers use the tunnel like virtual space because it is simple and lets them tweak with depth and height really precisely. So they built this thing called TEnvi, which stands for tunnel environment. The idea was to make a super controlled visual world that gives us lots of motion cues without any distracting stuff like textures or recognizable objects. This way, whatever we feel about the space should be because of its shape and how it moves, not because we recognize a chair or a picture on the wall. They built this TEnvi system using computer code. It has a main part that does all the drawing and then different ways to use it. You can play around with it like a video game to see what different settings look like in real time, or you can tell it to make a whole bunch of videos for an experiment. The cool thing is whatever you see in the preview is exactly what you get in the final video. So there are no surprises. Now, how does the virtual world move? Instead of by adding tiny movements step by step, which can lead to small errors over time, they calculated the camera's position mathematically for each moment. This means the movement is perfectly smooth and always accurate, like having a super precise stopwatch for how the virtual camera is moving. The virtual tunnel itself is made of these boxy segments stacked one after another. They only show the sides of these boxes, not the front or back, to keep the view clear. To make it feel like you are going through a never-ending tunnel, when a segment moves behind you, they just plop it back at the front again. Your brain doesn't notice this trick, and it keeps the tunnel looking continuous without any weird visual glitches. TEnvi has a few ways to make the tunnel look deep. It uses perspective, like how things get smaller as they get farther away. It also uses shading to show form, and you can even add wireframe lines. Plus, things can fade out as they get really far away. The best part is you can turn these depth cues on or off individually, so researchers can figure out which ones are most important for how we see depth. They can control the brightness of each tunnel segment in different ways, like alternating patterns or a steady brightness. And importantly, these patterns don't flicker. That means any changes in what you are seeing are from the actual movement or shape, not from the way the light is shown. You can also choose to see the tunnel in black and white or color, and the colors will always be the same. For making videos, they can take extra pictures within each frame to make the motion look super smooth, even if the video is playing fast or at a lower frame rate. This is like taking many photos in a real camera to avoid blurry motion, but in a virtual way, and it makes the movement feel more natural. When they export the final videos, they use a standard format that works with many research tools. And to make sure anyone can recreate the exact same stimulus later, each video comes with a file that lists all the settings used to make it. This is like having a recipe that guarantees the same dish every time. So, what makes these stimuli special? They're highly controllable, meaning you can change one thing at a time. They're predictable, so the same settings always give the same results. They have very little distracting detail, so you focus on the space itself. And the motion is perfectly timed. All these things make TEnvi a great tool for studying how we see and feel space. To show off how TEnvi works, the researchers did a small study. They had people online look at short videos of this virtual tunnel. The tunnel was either its normal size or it was made wider, taller, or longer. After watching, people rated how big they thought the room felt. They created 10 different videos. One was the basic tunnel, and then for width, height, and depth, they made 3 versions where each dimension was changed a little bit more each time. So you had a baseline and then 3 steps for each of the 3 dimensions. Each video lasted just 5 seconds. Participants were asked to watch the videos and then use a slider, like a volume control, to say how big or small the room felt. They just moved the slider from small to large. It was all done through their web browser. Everyone saw all the different tunnel versions. They saw each one multiple times to make sure the results were reliable. The order was mixed up so that you wouldn't see all the width changes in a row. For example, the baseline videos were mixed in 2, so people had something to compare everything else to. Now, for the sciencey part, they used a special computer analysis to look at all the answers. This method is good because it accounts for the fact that each person might tend to rate things a bit higher or lower than others. They were looking to see if changing the width, height, or depth of the tunnel made a big difference in how big people felt the room was. They used something called a p-value, which is like a fluke meter. If the p-value is super tiny, it means the result probably wasn't just a lucky guess or random chance. So, what did they find? When they looked at all the changes together, it turned out that changing the width of the tunnel had a much bigger effect on how big people thought the room was compared to changing the height or the depth. Specifically, widening the tunnel made people feel like the room was much larger. Changing the height had some effect, but it wasn't as strong, and changing the depth, how long the tunnel was, didn't really make a difference at all in how people rated the room size. And within the width changes, it was super consistent. Every time they made the tunnel wider, people rated the room as bigger, and each increase in width made the perceived size go up in a predictable way. The bigger the width change, the bigger the room felt. For the height changes, it was a bit different. People rated the rooms as smaller when the height was changed compared to the baseline, but it didn't seem to matter much how much they changed the height. The different height levels didn't lead to clearly different ratings among themselves. It was more like a general shift when height was altered, rather than a scaled response. And as for depth, it seemed to have no real impact. No matter how they changed the length of the tunnel, people's ratings of room size stayed pretty much the same. They also checked if people got tired or bored during the experiment, and it seemed like that wasn't a factor. The experiment wasn't too long for most people. So what does this all mean? The strongest finding is that the width of a space seems to be a really important cue for how we perceive its size, especially when we're moving through it. When a tunnel gets wider, the sides expand in our vision, and that gives our brain a strong signal that the space is opening up. It seems our brains pay more attention to the sides of the space than to how tall it is or how long it stretches out in front of us. The height changes did something, but it wasn't a smooth graded effect, like with the width, and the depth, the length of the tunnel, just didn't seem to register much in terms of perceived room size in this setup. It is likely that with screens, we primarily rely on cues that are clear on a flat surface, like perspective, and how things flow past us. Width changes create very noticeable changes in that flow and perspective. Depth changes, especially over longer distances, might be harder to judge accurately on a screen without other cues. Now, every study has its limits. This virtual tunnel was very simple, no furniture, no pictures. That helped the researchers focus on just the shape, but it is not like a real room. Also, they only tested a certain range of sizes. Maybe if the tunnels were much longer, depth would become more important. And they asked people to explicitly say how big it felt. That is different from how you might feel about a space's comfort or how easy it is to walk through. Overall, this study shows that TEnvi is a really useful tool for understanding how we perceive space. It lets scientists precisely control visual elements, and their findings suggest that when we're moving, the width of our surroundings plays a bigger role in how we judge the size of a space than its length. It's a reminder that our brains are constantly interpreting visual information, and the way a space is shaped dramatically influences our experience of it. So next time you're in a room, think about its width. It might be the biggest factor in how spacious you feel it is. What do you think about these findings? Does it match your own experiences? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into perception, be sure to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply. We'll see you in the next one.